Cruel orphanage owner burns a girl's doll. What happens next changes her life forever. The air in the orphanage was always heavy. It wasn't just the old building's musty smell or the damp chill that seeped through its walls. It was the unspoken despair that clung to every corner. The children who lived there carried it in their small, stooped shoulders and their downcast eyes. Most of them had long since given up hope of escape, resigned to the cruel rules of the place and the iron grip of its owner, Ms. Hargrove. Ms. Hargrove was a tall, stern woman with cold eyes and a voice that could silence a room with a single word. To the world outside, she was the picture of charity, a woman who had dedicated her life to running an orphanage and caring for the unwanted children of society. But inside those walls, she ruled with an iron fist. Punishment was her favorite tool for keeping the children in line, and she seemed to derive a twisted pleasure from breaking their spirits. For young Emma, life at the orphanage had been particularly harsh. At 8 years old, she was a quiet, imaginative girl with a head full of dreams she kept carefully hidden from the world. Unlike the other children, who had learned to suppress their personalities to avoid Ms. Hargrove's wrath, Emma clung to a fragile piece of herself, the small, tattered doll that her mother had given her before she passed away. The doll, with its worn dress and one missing button eye, was Emma's only source of comfort in the orphanage. She had named it Rose and carried it with her everywhere, whispering her secrets and dreams to it when no one else was around. To Emma, Rose wasn't just a toy, she was a friend, a protector, and a connection to the life she had lost. But Ms. Hargrove saw Rose as a problem. One rainy afternoon, as the children sat at their wooden desks scribbling answers to Ms. Hargrove's tedious arithmetic problems, Emma's grip on Rose tightened. She had hidden the doll beneath her desk, hoping to keep her close without drawing attention. But Ms. Hargrove's sharp eyes were always watching. "Emma," Ms. Hargrove barked, her heels clicking against the wooden floor as she approached. "What are you hiding under there?" Emma froze, her small hands trembling. "Nothing, ma'am," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Ms. Hargrove's eyes narrowed as she reached down and yanked Rose from Emma's grasp. The room went silent, the other children watching with a mix of fear and helplessness. "So, this is the infamous doll you've been clinging to," Ms. Hargrove said, holding Rose up for the class to see. Her voice dripped with disdain. "I've told you before, Emma, no toys during lessons. You think you're special, don't you? That you deserve to break the rules." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she shook her head. "No, please don't." But Ms. Hargrove wasn't listening. She turned and marched toward the fireplace at the front of the room, her grip on Rose tightening. The children gasped as they realized what was about to happen. "Please, Ms. Hargrove," Emma cried, jumping to her feet. "She's all I have. Please don't take her." Ms. Hargrove turned to face Emma, her expression icy. "You have nothing, Emma," she said coldly. "And it's time you learned that lesson." With a swift motion, she tossed Rose into the roaring flames. Emma's scream pierced the air, a raw and desperate sound that echoed in the silent room. She ran to the fireplace, her small hands reaching out as if she could somehow save her beloved doll. But it was too late. Rose was already engulfed in flames, her fragile body consumed by the fire. The other children watched in stunned silence, their hearts breaking for Emma but too afraid to intervene. Ms. Hargrove stood with her arms crossed, a look of satisfaction on her face. "Sit down, Emma," she said sharply, "and let this be a lesson to all of you. Attachments are a weakness. You're here to learn discipline, not to indulge in childish fantasies." But Emma didn't sit down. She stood frozen in front of the fireplace, her tears falling freely as she stared at the charred remains of Rose. In that moment, something inside her broke, but not in the way Ms. Hargrove intended. That night, as the children lay in their cold, creaky beds, Emma sat awake in the darkness. Her mind replayed the events of the day over and over, her grief mingling with anger and determination. She couldn't let Ms. Hargrove win. Rose may have been taken from her, but Emma still had her dreams, and she wouldn't let anyone take those away. As she sat there, a faint glow appeared in the corner of the room. Emma blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but the glow grew brighter, taking on the shape of a small figure. It was Rose, or at least, something that looked like her. The doll's charred exterior was gone, replaced by a radiant, otherworldly light. "Emma," the figure said softly, its voice gentle and warm. "Don't be afraid." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Rose? Is it really you?" The figure nodded. "I'm here, Emma. And I'm here to help you. You're stronger than you think, and it's time for you to stand up for yourself and for the others." Emma stared in awe as the glowing figure reached out and touched her hand. A wave of warmth and courage washed over her, filling the empty space left by her grief. "You can't do it alone," Rose said. "But you don't have to. The others are waiting for someone to lead them. You can be that person." The next morning, Emma woke with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She gathered the other children in a quiet corner of the yard during their brief recess and told them about her plan. "We can't let Miss Hargrove treat us like this anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling in her chest. "We have to stand together. If we work as a team, she can't hurt us." The other children looked at her with a mix of skepticism and hope. They had spent so long living in fear that the idea of standing up to Miss Hargrove seemed impossible. But Emma's determination was contagious, and one by one, they began to nod. "What do we do?" asked Tommy, the oldest boy in the group. Emma took a deep breath. "We show her that we're not afraid anymore. And we make her see that she can't break us." Over the next few days, the children worked in secret, building their courage and planning their next move. They supported each other in small but meaningful ways, sharing food, offering words of encouragement, and reminding each other that they were stronger together. When the time came, they stood united in the orphanage's dining hall, their small faces filled with determination as they faced Ms. Hargrove. "What is the meaning of this?" Ms. Hargrove demanded, her voice sharp and unforgiving. Emma stepped forward, her chin held high. "We're not afraid of you anymore," she said firmly. "You can't take anything else from us, because we have each other. And we're not going to let you hurt us anymore." For a moment, Ms. Hargrove was stunned into silence. She had spent years controlling these children through fear, and she had never imagined they would dare to stand up to her. But as she looked at their resolute faces, she realized that her power over them was slipping away. "You think you can defy me?" she hissed, her voice trembling with anger. "You'll regret this, all of you." But the children didn't back down. They stood their ground, their unity unshaken. Ms. Hargrove's anger was palpable as she glared at the children standing in defiance. Her usual intimidation tactics had always worked before, but now, something was different. The fear she had cultivated in them for so long was gone, replaced by an unshakable determination. For the first time, Ms. Hargrove realized she wasn't in control. "Back to your rooms, all of you," she bellowed, her voice echoing through the dining hall. But no one moved. The children remained where they stood, their gazes unwavering. Emma stepped forward again, her small frame a stark contrast to Ms. Hargrove's imposing presence. "No," Emma said firmly. Her voice didn't waver. "We won't go back to our rooms. We won't let you scare us anymore." The other children nodded in agreement, their courage bolstered by Emma's leadership. Ms. Hargrove's face twisted with rage, but beneath her anger was a flicker of something else, uncertainty. She had always relied on fear to keep the children under control, but now that fear was gone, and she didn't know how to handle it. "You insolent little brats," she spat, taking a step toward Emma. "Do you really think you can defy me and get away with it?" Emma stood her ground, even as Ms. Hargrove loomed over her. "We're not alone," she said. "And you can't take anything else from us?" As the standoff continued, a loud knock echoed through the orphanage's front door. The sound startled everyone, breaking the tension in the room. Ms. Hargrove turned sharply, her face pale. She wasn't expecting any visitors, especially not at this hour. "Stay here," she barked at the children before storming off toward the door. Emma glanced at the others, her heart pounding. "This is our chance," she whispered. "Whatever happens next, we stay together." The children nodded, their determination solidifying. They could feel the tide turning, even if they didn't yet know how. When Ms. Hargrove opened the door, she was met with two stern-faced officials from the Child Welfare Bureau. Behind them stood a young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard in hand. "Ms. Hargrove?" one of the officials asked, his voice firm. "Yes," she replied, her tone clipped. "What is this about?" "We received multiple complaints about the conditions at this orphanage," the man said. "We're here to conduct an inspection." Ms. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Complaints? From whom?" The young woman stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. "We can't disclose that information, ma'am. But we've been hearing troubling reports about the treatment of the children here, and we intend to investigate." Ms. Hargrove's mouth opened to protest, but the officials didn't wait for her permission. They stepped inside, their eyes immediately taking in the dilapidated state of the orphanage. The peeling paint, the broken furniture, the general air of neglect. The young woman followed closely, her pen moving swiftly across the clipboard. Meanwhile, back in the dining hall, the children exchanged nervous glances as the sound of footsteps approached. Moments later, the officials entered the room, their expressions softening as they took in the sight of the children huddled together. Emma stepped forward, her small face set with determination. "Are you here to help us?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. The young woman knelt down to Emma's level, offering her a reassuring smile. "Yes, we are," she said. "My name is Clara. Can you tell me what's been happening here?" Emma hesitated, glancing at the other children. They all looked at her, silently encouraging her to speak. Taking a deep breath, Emma began to tell their story. How Miss Hargrove had mistreated them, how she had destroyed the things they loved, and how she had ruled the orphanage with fear and cruelty. The officials listened intently, their expressions darkening with every word. When Emma finished, Clara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for telling us, Emma," she said. "You're very brave." In the hours that followed, the orphanage was thoroughly inspected. The officials documented the state of the building, the lack of proper food and clothing for the children, and the absence of any real care or compassion from Ms. Hargrove. Meanwhile, Clara continued to speak with the children, gathering their stories and assuring them that they would no longer be subjected to such treatment. Ms. Hargrove, for her part, tried to maintain her composure, insisting that the children were exaggerating and that the complaints were baseless. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the officials were not swayed by her protests. By the end of the day, the decision was clear. The orphanage would be shut down, and Ms. Hargrove would face legal consequences for her actions. The children would be relocated to safer, more supportive environments where they could finally receive the care they deserved. As the sun began to set, the children gathered in the yard, watching as Ms. Hargrove was escorted out of the building by the officials. For the first time in years, there was a sense of relief in the air, a feeling that the nightmare was finally over. Emma stood at the front of the group, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She thought of Rose and the courage she had found in the aftermath of losing her. Rose may have been gone, but her spirit lived on in the bravery Emma had shown and the unity she had inspired among the children. Clara approached the group, her kind smile never wavering. "You're all going to be okay," she said. "We're going to find homes for each of you, places where you'll be loved and cared for." Emma looked up at Clara, her eyes filled with hope for the first time in a long while. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping us." Clara knelt down and gently took Emma's hand. "You helped yourselves, Emma. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That's something to be proud of." In the weeks that followed, the children were placed in new homes, each one carefully chosen to ensure they would be safe and supported. Emma was taken in by a warm, loving couple who encouraged her to dream and gave her the space to heal. For the first time, she had a room of her own, filled with books, art supplies, and even a new doll, a gift from Clara, who had stayed in touch. But Emma never forgot Rose or the lessons she had learned at the orphanage. She carried those memories with her as she grew older, using them as fuel for a life dedicated to helping others. As an adult, Emma became an advocate for children in foster care, working tirelessly to ensure that no child would ever have to endure what she and the others had experienced. Years later, at the grand opening of a new children's center she had helped create, Emma stood before a crowd of supporters and shared her story. She spoke of the darkness she had faced, the courage she had found, and the people who had helped her along the way. "In the worst moments of my life, I learned that even the smallest spark of hope can grow into something powerful," she said. "And when we stand together, we can create a world where every child feels safe, loved, and valued." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Emma looked out at the faces before her, she felt a sense of peace. She had taken the pain of her past and transformed it into something beautiful, something that would continue to shine, just like Rose. The children's center Emma had helped create became a beacon of hope in the community, attracting children and families from all walks of life. The facility was unlike any orphanage or foster home Emma had ever known. It was vibrant, welcoming, and filled with opportunities for children to thrive. There were classrooms for education, art studios for creativity, and play areas that allowed the children to simply be kids, free from fear or judgment. Emma spent her days working closely with the children and mentoring the staff, many of whom were former foster kids themselves. She was determined to create a safe space where every child felt seen and valued, a place where they could rebuild their confidence and dream freely. But Emma's work didn't stop there. She knew the problem of neglect and mistreatment extended far beyond the walls of the orphanage she had once called home. She wanted to make systemic changes to ensure no child would ever experience what she and the others had endured under Ms. Hargrove's reign. Driven by her passion, Emma began working with policymakers and child welfare organizations to push for reforms in the foster care and orphanage systems. She advocated for stricter oversight of facilities, mandatory training for caregivers, and increased funding for programs that supported children's emotional and psychological well-being. Her efforts caught the attention of influential figures, including senators, philanthropists, and even celebrities who wanted to support her mission. Emma used her growing platform to share her story, highlighting the resilience of the children she had met along the way and the importance of giving every child a chance to succeed. One of the most impactful moments came when Emma testified before a congressional committee about her experiences. Standing in the Grand Chamber, she spoke with conviction, her voice unwavering as she recounted the horrors of Ms. Hargrove's orphanage and the strength it had taken to overcome them. "Children are not just numbers in a system," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "They are individuals with hopes, dreams, and untapped potential. It is our responsibility to nurture them, to protect them, and to give them the tools they need to thrive. We cannot afford to fail them." Her testimony was met with a standing ovation, and soon after, new legislation was introduced to improve the foster care system nationwide. The bill, informally known as Emma's Law, mandated regular inspections of orphanages and foster homes, provided funding for mental health resources, and established strict penalties for abusive caretakers. As Emma's advocacy work gained momentum, she maintained close contact with Clara, the kind social worker who had been instrumental in shutting down Ms. Hargrove's orphanage. Clara had continued her own work in child welfare, and the two women often collaborated on projects and events. One sunny afternoon, as they prepared for a fundraiser at the Children's Center, Clara turned to Emma with a smile. "You've come so far," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Do you ever stop to think about how much you've accomplished?" Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not really. There's still so much to do. But you've already changed so many lives," Clara said, "including mine. Watching you grow into the leader you are today has been one of the greatest joys of my career." Emma felt a lump in her throat as she looked at Clara. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said. "You believed in us when no one else did. You gave me the courage to fight for what was right." Clara reached out and took Emma's hand. "And you've passed that courage on to so many others. That's what makes this work worth it." One day, while Emma was visiting a neighboring city to speak at a conference, she received a surprising piece of news. Ms. Hargrove had been released from prison. The revelation sent a chill through her, stirring up memories she had long since buried. Though Ms. Hargrove had been convicted of multiple counts of child abuse and neglect, she had only served a portion of her sentence due to her advanced age and declining health. Now, she was living in a small apartment, far removed from the life of authority she had once wielded. At first, Emma wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her wanted to forget Ms. Hargrove entirely, to focus on the future and leave the past behind. But another part of her, one she couldn't ignore, felt compelled to confront the woman who had caused her and so many others so much pain. After much deliberation, Emma decided to visit Ms. Hargrove. It wasn't about seeking revenge or closure, it was about understanding. She wanted to look Ms. Hargrove in the eye and show her that she had not won, that the children she had tried to break had grown into strong, resilient individuals. Emma arrived at Ms. Hargrove's apartment building on a rainy afternoon, her heart pounding as she climbed the narrow staircase. When she reached the door, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door opened slowly, revealing a frail, elderly woman with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. It took Ms. Hargrove a moment to recognize Emma, but when she did, her expression hardened. "What do you want?" Ms. Hargrove asked, her voice sharp despite its weakness. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I wanted to see you," she said, "to tell you that I'm not afraid of you anymore." Ms. Hargrove scoffed, turning away. "You think I care about that?" "I don't know if you care," Emma said, stepping inside. "But I needed to say it. You tried to break us, but you failed. We stood together, and we're stronger because of it." Ms. Hargrove didn't respond, but Emma continued. "I've spent my life fighting for children who were treated the way we were. And for every child who finds safety, for every life that's changed, it's another reminder that you didn't win." For a moment, Ms. Hargrove seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. She sank into a worn armchair, her hands trembling. "I did what I thought I had to do," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I wanted to make you strong." Emma shook her head, her voice firm but calm. "What you did wasn't strength, it was cruelty. But we found strength despite you, not because of you." As Emma turned to leave, she paused at the door. "I hope you find peace, Ms. Hargrove. But I won't carry the weight of what you did anymore." The encounter with Ms. Hargrove left Emma feeling a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that while the past would always be a part of her story, it didn't define her. What mattered most was the future she was building, not just for herself, but for the countless children whose lives she was determined to change. Emma continued her work with unwavering dedication, expanding the Children's Center, mentoring young leaders, and pushing for reforms in child welfare systems worldwide. Her efforts earned her numerous awards and accolades, but what meant the most to her were the letters she received from children whose lives had been transformed by her work. One such letter came from a young girl named Lily, who had found a home at the Children's Center after years of being shuffled between foster homes. "You showed me that it's okay to dream again," Lily wrote. "Thank you for giving me a place where I can feel safe and loved." Emma kept the letter in her office, a constant reminder of why she did what she did. For every child like Lily, for every voice that had been silenced and every dream that had been lost, Emma was determined to keep fighting. As the years went by, Emma's impact only grew. She became a symbol of resilience and hope, proof that even in the face of darkness, it was possible to create light. And though she never forgot the pain of her past, she used it as fuel to build a future where no child would ever have to feel alone. And in her quietest moments, when she thought of Rose and the courage the little doll had inspired, Emma knew that she had truly changed the world. With every milestone she reached, Emma found herself dreaming bigger. The success of her Children's Center had laid the foundation for what would become a worldwide network of safe spaces for children in need. These centers were more than just shelters. They were hubs of opportunity, healing, and growth. Emma wanted every child, no matter where they came from, to have a chance to thrive. To make this vision a reality, Emma launched the Global Resilience Initiative. This ambitious project aimed to establish centers in underserved areas across the globe, tailoring each one to meet the unique needs of its community. From rural villages in Africa to war-torn regions in the Middle East, Emma's team worked tirelessly to provide resources, education, and emotional support to children who had experienced unimaginable hardships. But as the initiative grew, so did the challenges. Emma quickly realized that running an international organization required more than passion. It required strategic planning, cultural sensitivity, and a willingness to navigate complex political landscapes. One of the first major hurdles came when Emma's team began working to establish a center in a remote area of South Asia. The village, nestled in the shadow of towering mountains, had been devastated by years of conflict and neglect. Many of the children had lost their parents, and those who remained faced daily struggles to survive. Emma arrived in the village with a team of social workers and educators, ready to begin the process of building the center. But they were met with resistance. The village elders, wary of outsiders, questioned their intentions and expressed doubts about the sustainability of the project. "We've seen people come and go," one elder said, his voice heavy with skepticism. "They promise change, but they leave when things get difficult. Why should we trust you?" Emma didn't shy away from their concerns. Instead, she listened patiently, acknowledging the community's fears and pledging to work alongside them rather than imposing her own ideas. "This isn't about us coming in and telling you what to do," she said during a meeting with the elders. "It's about working together to create something that will last. We're here to support you, not to replace what you already have." To build trust, Emma's team began by addressing immediate needs. They partnered with local organizations to provide clean water, medical supplies, and educational materials. Slowly but surely, they demonstrated their commitment to the village's well-being. One of the most poignant moments during Emma's time in the village came when she met a boy named Arif. At just 10 years old, Arif had already endured more loss and hardship than most people experienced in a lifetime. His parents had been killed in the conflict, and he had been left to care for his younger sister, Mira. Despite his circumstances, Arif had a fierce determination to protect Mira and give her a better life. He spent his days scavenging for food and his nights teaching her the little he remembered from his own schooling. When Emma first met Arif, he was reluctant to trust her. Years of surviving on his own had taught him to be cautious. But as Emma spent more time in the village, Arif began to open up. He shared his dreams of becoming a teacher, his love for books, and his hope that one day, Mira could go to school. Moved by his resilience, Emma made it her mission to ensure that Arif and Mira would have the opportunities they deserved. She helped Arif enroll in a local school and provided Mira with childcare so that he could focus on his studies. She also arranged for regular deliveries of food and supplies, easing the burden on Arif's young shoulders. As the weeks turned into months, Arif began to thrive. His once guarded demeanor softened, and he became a source of inspiration for the other children in the village. Emma often found him leading small study groups, teaching the younger kids what he had learned in school. "You're already a teacher," Emma told him one day, smiling as she watched him explain a math problem to Mira. "And one day, you'll be the best teacher this village has ever seen." Arif's eyes lit up with pride. "That's because you believed in me," he said. "No one's ever done that before." After months of hard work and collaboration, the children's center in the village was finally complete. The building, constructed with the help of local workers, was a symbol of resilience and hope. Its brightly painted walls stood out against the rugged landscape, a beacon of opportunity for the children who had once felt forgotten. The grand opening ceremony was a joyous occasion, attended by villagers, Emma's team, and even representatives from international organizations that had supported the project. The children performed traditional songs and dances, their laughter filling the air as they celebrated their new home. Emma stood at the front of the crowd, her heart swelling with pride as she looked out at the faces of the children she had come to care for so deeply. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This center is more than just a building," she said. "It's a promise that every child here has the right to dream, to learn, and to grow. You are the future of this village, and we are here to support you every step of the way." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Emma stepped back, Arif approached her with Mira by his side. In his hands, he held a small, hand-woven bracelet. "This is for you," he said, his voice shy but sincere. "To thank you for everything you've done." Emma accepted the bracelet, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, Arif," she said, slipping it onto her wrist. "But the real thanks goes to you. You're the reason we're here." The success of the village center sparked a ripple effect, inspiring neighboring communities to reach out to Emma's team for support. Each new project brought its own challenges, but Emma and her team approached every situation with the same commitment to collaboration and respect. The Global Resilience Initiative soon became a model for sustainable development, earning recognition from humanitarian organizations and governments around the world. Emma was invited to speak at international conferences, where she shared the lessons she had learned and encouraged others to adopt a similar approach. But despite her growing influence, Emma remained grounded. For her, the most meaningful moments were the quiet ones. Watching children like Ariv and Mira flourish, hearing their laughter, and knowing that she had played a small part in their journey. Years into her work, Emma decided to return to her hometown to visit the children's center that had started it all. Walking through its familiar halls, she was struck by how much it had grown. The walls were now adorned with artwork created by the children, and the once empty rooms were filled with books, toys, and laughter. Emma spent the day catching up with the staff and meeting the children who now called the center home. She listened to their stories, offered words of encouragement, and reminded them that they were capable of achieving anything they set their minds to. That evening, as the sun set over the center, Emma stood in the yard, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought of Rose, the doll that had been her lifeline during the darkest days of her childhood. In many ways, Rose's memory had guided her, reminding her of the importance of hope and resilience. As Emma looked up at the stars, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had believed in her, for the children who inspired her every day, and for the journey that had brought her to this moment. She knew that her work was far from over, but she also knew that she wasn't alone. Together with the countless individuals who had joined her mission, she was creating a world where every child could feel safe, loved, and valued. And that, she thought, was the greatest legacy she could ever hope to leave. The Global Resilience Initiative had grown into a movement far greater than Emma could have imagined. By its 10th anniversary, the network of children's centers spanned across continents, each one uniquely tailored to meet the needs of the communities it served. The centers had become a lifeline for children who had been abandoned, displaced, or overlooked. They were safe havens where young minds could flourish, and for Emma, every new success was a testament to the power of resilience. But Emma knew her work wasn't finished. As she traveled to different countries, meeting children and hearing their stories, she became acutely aware of the systemic issues that continued to plague vulnerable populations. Poverty, war, and inequality created endless cycles of suffering, and while her centers addressed immediate needs, Emma wanted to attack the root causes. She began to collaborate with global organizations to tackle the broader issues. Education became a cornerstone of her efforts as she worked to establish partnerships with schools and universities to create scholarship programs for underprivileged youth. She also championed healthcare initiatives, ensuring that children in remote areas had access to vaccinations, clean water, and mental health support. Emma's advocacy work took her to the halls of the United Nations, where she addressed world leaders during a special session on children's rights. Standing before an audience of diplomats and policymakers, she spoke with the same conviction she had shown as a child standing up to Ms. Hargrove. Every child deserves a chance to live with dignity, to dream without fear, and to reach their full potential, she said. We cannot claim to be building a better world while leaving millions of children behind. The time to act is now. Her speech earned a standing ovation, and it was clear that her message had resonated. Within months, several nations committed to increasing funding for child welfare programs and strengthening protections for vulnerable populations. Emma's voice had sparked a wave of change, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose as she continued her work. Emma often reflected on the children she had met along her journey. Each one had left an indelible mark on her heart, reminding her of why she had dedicated her life to this cause. One child in particular stood out, Ariv, the boy from the remote village who had dreamed of becoming a teacher. Years after the opening of the Children's Center in Ariv's village, Emma received an invitation to attend a special ceremony. Ariv, now a young man, was graduating with a degree in education and had been offered a teaching position at the very school he had once attended. When Emma arrived at the ceremony, she was greeted by a beaming Ariv who hugged her tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Emma shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You did this, Ariv. You had the courage to dream, even when everything seemed impossible. I'm so proud of you." During his graduation speech, Ariv shared his story with the audience, describing how Emma's belief in him had changed his life. "She taught me that resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving, about lifting others up along the way. I hope to be that person for my students." Emma felt a profound sense of fulfillment as she watched Arav accept his diploma. His success was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could imagine. As Emma's responsibilities grew, so did the demands on her time and energy. She often found herself working late into the night, traveling from one country to the next, and juggling countless projects. While she was deeply passionate about her work, she began to feel the weight of exhaustion creeping in. One evening, after a particularly grueling week, Emma sat alone in her office, staring at the piles of paperwork that seemed to grow larger every day. For the first time in years, she felt overwhelmed and unsure of how to move forward. Clara, who had remained a close friend and confidant, noticed the strain Emma was under and decided to intervene. She visited Emma's office unannounced, bringing a pot of tea and a reassuring presence. "You're burning the candle at both ends," Clara said gently, pouring them each a cup. "You've given so much to this cause, but you can't pour from an empty cup." Emma sighed, resting her head in her hands. "I just feel like there's so much more to do. Every time I help one child, I think about all the others who still need help." Clara reached out and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You've done more than most people could in 10 lifetimes. But if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to keep going. It's okay to take a step back and let others share the load." Emma nodded, realizing the truth in Clara's words. She decided to delegate more responsibilities to her team and take some time to focus on her own well-being. She began attending yoga classes, spending more time outdoors, and reconnecting with the hobbies she had once loved, like painting and writing. The break allowed Emma to recharge and return to her work with renewed energy. It also reinforced the importance of balance, a lesson she began to share with her team and the children she mentored. As Emma entered her 40s, she began to think about the future of the Global Resilience Initiative. She knew that for the movement to continue thriving, it needed strong leadership and a clear vision. Emma decided to establish a leadership council composed of individuals from diverse backgrounds, including former foster children, educators, and social workers. The council's first task was to create a long-term strategic plan for the initiative, ensuring its sustainability for generations to come. Emma worked closely with the council, sharing her insights and encouraging them to bring their own ideas to the table. One of the council members, a young woman named Sophia, had grown up in one of Emma's centers and had gone on to become a successful lawyer. During a meeting, Sophia spoke about the importance of empowering local leaders to take ownership of the centers in their communities. The success of these centers isn't just about providing resources, it's about building a sense of pride and ownership within the community, Sophia said. "When people feel invested, they're more likely to protect and sustain what we've built." Emma wholeheartedly agreed, and the council began implementing programs to train local leaders and provide them with the tools they needed to manage the centers independently. This approach not only strengthened the initiative but also ensured that it remained rooted in the communities it served. On the 20th anniversary of the Children's Center that had started it all, Emma hosted a reunion for the children who had once called it home. Dozens of adults arrived, many of them bringing their own children, eager to show them the place that had given them a second chance. As Emma walked through the familiar halls, she was greeted by laughter, hugs, and countless stories of lives that had been transformed. One former resident, a man named Jacob, approached her with tears in his eyes. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know where I'd be if it weren't for you and this center. You gave me hope when I had none." Emma smiled, her heart full. "It wasn't just me, Jacob. You found the strength within yourself. I just gave you a little nudge." The reunion was a celebration of resilience and a reminder of the power of community. As Emma looked around at the faces of those who had overcome so much, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. That evening, Emma stood in front of the crowd and delivered a heartfelt speech. This center was built on the belief that every child deserves a chance to dream, to grow, and to find their place in the world. Seeing all of you here today reminds me that those dreams are worth fighting for. You are the proof that resilience can change the world. As Emma's work continued to evolve, she began to step back from the day-to-day operations, focusing instead on mentoring the next generation of leaders. She knew that the movement she had started was no longer hers alone, It belonged to the millions of people who had embraced its mission and carried it forward. Emma spent her later years writing, traveling, and sharing her story with audiences around the world. Her memoir, The Strength Within, became a bestseller, inspiring countless readers to overcome their own challenges and make a difference in their communities. And though Emma's life was filled with accolades and achievements, her greatest joy came from the knowledge that she had created a legacy of hope. The centers she had built, the children she had helped, and the lives she had touched were a testament to the power of resilience and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found. As the years went by, Emma found herself reflecting more often on the beginnings of her journey, the fire that had ignited her drive to create a better world for vulnerable children. She thought of Rose, the tattered doll that had symbolized hope in her darkest moments, and how her small act of defiance against Ms. Hargrove had grown into a global movement. But now, in her mid-50s, Emma knew it was time to pass the torch. Her decision to step back wasn't born of exhaustion but of clarity. The movement she had built was no longer dependent on her alone. The Global Resilience Initiative had evolved into a self-sustaining organization, powered by passionate leaders around the world who were deeply committed to its mission. Emma saw this not as an end but as a new beginning, a chance for fresh ideas and perspectives to shape the future. At a special gathering of the Leadership Council, Emma made her announcement. The room, filled with people whose lives she had touched, fell silent as she spoke. "When I started this journey, I never imagined it would grow into what it is today," Emma said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This movement belongs to all of you now. You've proven time and time again that resilience is not just a word, it's a way of life. And I have every confidence that you'll continue to carry this mission forward." The council members responded with a standing ovation, their applause echoing through the room. While they would miss Emma's day-to-day presence, they knew her impact would endure. Before officially stepping back, Emma embarked on a farewell tour to visit as many centers as possible. She wanted to personally thank the staff, volunteers, and children who had made the initiative's success possible. Each stop on her tour was filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt conversations. In a bustling center in Nairobi, Emma met a young girl named Amina who reminded her of herself at that age. Amina was bright and imaginative, with a love for storytelling. She showed Emma a notebook filled with her handwritten stories, each one bursting with creativity and emotion. "These are incredible, Amina," Emma said, flipping through the pages. "You're going to be a great writer one day." Amina beamed. "I want to write books that help people feel brave, like yours did for me." Emma felt a lump in her throat. "You already have that power. Don't ever stop believing in yourself." At another center in Brazil, Emma reunited with Felipe, a former resident who had become a social worker. Felipe now led the very center he had once called home, providing the same care and support that had changed his life. "You inspired me, Emma," Felipe said during their conversation. "Every day, I try to honor what you taught me, to lead with compassion and never give up on anyone." Emma hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with pride. "You're the future of this movement, Felipe. And I couldn't be prouder." As Emma's farewell tour came to an end, she made one final stop, the site of the original children's center that had started it all. Though the center had been renovated and expanded over the years, its core essence remained the same, a place of hope and healing for children in need. Emma stood in the quiet courtyard, her mind drifting back to the days when she had been a scared, lonely child walking those very grounds. She thought of the small victories that had kept her going, the friendships that had given her strength, and the moment she had decided to fight for herself and the others. To commemorate the occasion, the staff had organized a special ceremony. Children from the center performed songs and dances, their joy a testament to the brighter futures they were building. As the celebration came to a close, the staff unveiled a statue in Emma's honor. The statue depicted a young girl holding a small doll, her gaze turned upward with determination. At its base was a plaque that read, "In honor of Emma Carter, whose courage and compassion changed the world." Emma's breath caught as she looked at the statue, tears streaming down her face. It was a perfect representation of her journey, a reminder of how far she had come and the lives she had touched along the way. After stepping back from her role in the Global Resilience Initiative, Emma found herself with more time to reflect, create, and explore new passions. She began writing again, pouring her thoughts and experiences into a series of books that blended memoir with inspiration and advice for others seeking to make a difference. Her first book, A Spark of Resilience, became an instant bestseller, praised for its honesty and heartfelt wisdom. Readers from all over the world wrote to Emma, sharing how her words had given them the courage to face their own challenges. Emma also took up painting, a hobby she had dabbled in as a child but had never had time to pursue. She found joy in the act of creation, using vibrant colors to express the emotions and memories that words couldn't capture. Her paintings often featured themes of hope and transformation, with many of them inspired by the children she had met. One day, a local gallery invited Emma to showcase her work in an exhibit titled From Darkness to Light. The exhibit drew large crowds, with visitors moved by the stories behind each piece. For Emma, it was a deeply personal way to continue sharing her journey. Though Emma had stepped back from leadership, she remained a mentor to the next generation of advocates and leaders. Young people from around the world sought her guidance, eager to learn from her experiences and carry her legacy forward. One of those young leaders was Sophia, a passionate advocate who had grown up in one of Emma's centers and had gone on to become a lawyer. Sophia had joined the Leadership Council years earlier, and now, she was poised to take on a greater role within the organization. During one of their conversations, Sophia shared her vision for the future. "I want to expand our reach even further," she said. "There are still so many children who need our help, and I believe we can do more." Emma smiled, her pride in Sophia evident. "You have everything it takes to make that happen," she said. "And I'll be here to support you every step of the way." As Emma watched Sophia take on more responsibilities, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The movement she had started was in capable hands, and she knew it would continue to grow and evolve in ways she couldn't even imagine. In her later years, Emma settled into a quiet life surrounded by nature. She purchased a small cottage near a lake, where she spent her days writing, painting, and enjoying the beauty of the world around her. She often hosted retreats for writers, artists, and advocates, creating a space where people could recharge and find inspiration. Though her days were slower, Emma's impact remained profound. The centers she had built continued to thrive, and the children whose lives she had touched went on to create ripples of change in their own communities. Her legacy was woven into the fabric of the movement, a testament to the power of resilience and compassion. On a crisp autumn morning, Emma sat on the porch of her cottage, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. She watched as the sunlight danced on the surface of the lake, her heart full of gratitude. She thought of Rose, the doll that had been her first source of comfort and strength, and how that small spark had grown into something so much bigger. Emma knew her journey had been far from easy, but she wouldn't have changed a thing. Every challenge, every heartbreak, and every triumph had shaped her into the person she was. And as she looked out at the world she had helped change, she felt a profound sense of peace. She smiled, knowing that the seeds she had planted would continue to grow long after she was gone. The children, the leaders, the centers, they were all part of a story that would endure for generations. And in that, Emma's legacy would live on.